It is 1:19 a.m. The Bab-el-Mandeb Strait is 18 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point, and it has been, for 15 months, the most dangerous 18 miles of water in the world for commercial shipping. For the USS guided missile destroyer tasked with maintaining freedom of navigation through this passage, the strait's geometry presents a specific problem that open ocean operations do not. The water narrows. The room to maneuver compresses. The threat arcs from the Yemeni coastline to the northeast and the Djiboutian coastline to the southwest close inward with every mile of southward progress, until, at the strait's minimum width, a destroyer is operating in a space that is measured not in the hundreds of nautical miles that define an ocean engagement, but in tens, a corridor where the options available to a ship's commanding officer are constrained by physics before they are constrained by tactics. The destroyer is transiting south. It has been in the strait for 31 minutes. The Bab-el-Mandeb transit at normal speed takes approximately 90 minutes from entry to exit into the Gulf of Aden. The destroyer is at the 51-minute mark of that transit, which places it at approximately the 14 nautical mile point south of the northern entrance, the narrowest zone. The zone where the threat arcs from both coastlines are shortest, and where the time from a shore-based launch to the ship's position is measured in seconds rather than minutes. The commanding officer has transited this strait 4 times in the past 17 days. Each transit has been different. The first was conducted under a threat posture that the intelligence assessment rated as elevated. The second was conducted after a Houthi shore-based anti-ship missile launch against a commercial vessel 12 hours prior. The third was conducted with a P-8A overhead and a surface escort element 12 miles ahead. This transit, the fourth, is being conducted with a Seahawk on-deck readiness, a P-8A 40 minutes away at the edge of its barrier pattern, and an intelligence assessment delivered at midnight that identified an increase in Houthi maritime unit communications in the southern Red Sea consistent with pre-operation coordination. The assessment did not specify the nature of the operation. It specified that something was being coordinated and that the timing placed it within the current watch period. At 1:19 a.m., the something resolves. The SPY-1D radar paints a contact at 4.3 nautical miles to the northeast. The contact is small, the radar return of a platform that has a surface cross-section somewhere between a large inflatable and a small boat, a return that the radar processor has been filtering from the sea clutter for the past 3 minutes, before the contact's speed and bearing rate finally distinguish it from the clutter with enough confidence to generate a track. The contact is moving at 22 knots on a bearing that is not toward the Yemeni coastline and is not away from the destroyer. It is moving toward the destroyer. At 22 knots, at 4.3 nautical miles, it will reach the ship in 11 minutes and 40 seconds. The watch officer reports the contact to the CO at 1:19:31 a.m. The CO steps to the tactical display. He is looking at a radar return whose size and speed profile is consistent with a fast patrol craft or a large rigid inflatable. He is also looking at a strait that is 18 miles wide and a ship that is in the middle of it. The options for maneuvering away from the contact are real, but limited in ways that open ocean options are not. Turning north takes the destroyer back toward the strait's entrance and away from its destination. Turning west closes the range to the Djiboutian coast. Turning east opens the range to the Yemeni coast, but also closes the range to whatever other threat assets may be positioned in the eastern sector. The tactical picture has not resolved those assets yet. The tactical picture has resolved one contact at 4.3 nautical miles and is building toward a fuller picture at a rate that is slower than the contact is closing. At 1:20 a.m., the Seahawk launches from the destroyer's flight deck. The aircraft climbs through 200 feet and turns northeast, the lead pilot pushing the transit speed to maximum and descending to 500 feet as the strait's terrain and radar environment require. The forward infrared camera activates. The display in the cockpit begins building a picture of the dark water northeast of the destroyer's track. At 1:21 a.m., the camera finds the contact. The lead pilot's first transmission to the CIC is 3 words: it is low. Low means the contact is not sitting on the water the way a surface craft sits on the water. It is in the water. Its profile, visible on the infrared camera as a heat signature that is barely above the surface return, is consistent with a platform whose hull is submerged to within a few inches of the waterline, with only a small superstructure and a propulsion exhaust above the surface. The Houthi maritime forces have been developing and deploying semi-submersible surface attack craft for the past 11 months. The intelligence community has documented 3 confirmed platforms, assessed the inventory at between 4 and 7 total hulls, and noted in each assessment that the platforms are optimized for exactly this scenario: low radar cross-section, low infrared signature, operating in the thermal and clutter environment of a strait at night where the background noise is high and the reaction time available to a transiting warship is short. This is a Houthi semi-submersible. It is moving at 22 knots toward the destroyer, and it is 4 nautical miles away, and the Seahawk is the first system that has been able to see it clearly. The lead pilot provides a position update and a brief target description to the CIC at 1:21:14 a.m. The description is clinical and specific. The CIC acknowledges, and the TAO updates the threat designation from surface contact to hostile surface craft and transmits a weapons authorization request to 5th Fleet at 1:21:22 a.m. The request is routed through the theater command chain at a speed that the communications infrastructure of a modern naval operation allows, and that the situation's timeline requires to be fast enough. 5th Fleet authorizes engagement at 1:21:51 a.m., 29 seconds from request to authorization. The authorization covers the semi-submersible contact as a hostile platform, demonstrating hostile intent through its closing course and posture. The TAO designates the contact for 5-inch gun engagement at 1:22:04 a.m. The 5-inch mount on the destroyer's bow has been tracking the contact since the Seahawk's first position update refined the radar track beyond the threshold of ambiguity. The fire control solution is running. The round is in the chamber. The mount is on bearing. The authorization has arrived. The first round fires at 1:22:07 a.m. The 5-inch round crosses 3.8 nautical miles of dark strait water in a flight time of approximately 11 seconds. The impact is observed by the Seahawk's infrared camera, a white flash at the contact's position that expands and then contracts. The contact's track on the SPY-1D updates 2 seconds later. The contact is still moving. The speed has not changed. The bearing has not changed. The round hit the water near the contact, but did not achieve a direct hit on a platform whose surface cross-section is measured in square feet rather than square meters. The second round fires at 1:22:21 a.m. The third at 1:22:34 a.m. The Seahawk lead pilot is calling corrections to the fire control solution, minor adjustments to the bearing and range based on the infrared camera's view of where the rounds are impacting relative to the contact, in a voice that is precise and rhythmic and contains no wasted syllables. This is a skill that is trained and then practiced again, until the rhythm of observation and transmission becomes something the nervous system performs without routing it through the hesitation that language usually requires. The corrections arrive in the CIC. The fire control system absorbs them. The solutions update. The fourth round finds the contact at 1:22:49 a.m. The thermal camera shows a detonation that is different from the near-miss flashes of the first 3 rounds, larger, with a secondary thermal bloom that persists for 4 seconds before beginning to contract. The contact speed drops from 22 knots to 14. The bearing rate changes. The contact is no longer on a direct intercept course. It is turning, not toward the Yemeni coast, north, back up the strait. The TAO watches the bearing rate change and does not immediately reclassify the threat status. A damaged semi-submersible that is turning is not the same as a neutralized one. The contact is still moving. It is still in the water. It is still capable, if its crew has survived the hit and maintained propulsion, of resuming an attack profile. At 1:23:11 a.m., the picture changes in a way the TAO has been watching for and hoping not to see. A second contact appears on the SPY-1D, southwest of the destroyer's track, bearing 247 degrees, Range 5.1 nautical miles. Speed 19 knots. Closing. Then a third. Bearing 031 degrees. Range 6.8 nautical mile. Speed 24 knots. 3 semi-submersible contacts. 2 new, 1 damaged, and turning. The damaged contact was not the attack. The damaged contact was the probe, the platform sent first to locate the destroyer's exact position, draw its radar attention, consume its initial weapons engagement, and fix the ship's location for the platforms that were waiting further out in the strait's clutter, until the moment of engagement committed the destroyer to a defensive orientation it could not immediately break. This is the desperation move. This is the full architecture of what the Houthi Maritime Command designed in the 11 months they spent building these platforms and studying American destroyer engagement patterns in the strait. A 3-contact coordinated approach with a probe lead, timed to present the ship with 2 simultaneous threats from different bearings at the moment the ship's fire control attention was fixed on the probe. The CO issues a course change at 1:23:19 a.m., north 5 degrees, a heading adjustment that opens the range slightly to the southwestern contact at the cost of closing slightly to the northeastern one, a calculated trade that buys the fire control system 30 seconds of additional engagement time on the northeastern threat before the ranges equalize. 30 seconds. The CO has calculated this. The 30 seconds are not free. They cost position in the strait and fuel and the noise of a course change that every sensor on the Yemeni coast is recording. They are 30 seconds of additional fire control solution time on the contact that is closer. The Seahawk repositions to the southwestern contact at 1:23:22 a.m. The lead pilot drops to 400 feet and activates the laser designator. The camera finds the contact. Its profile matches the first semi-submersible. Low, partially submerged, a heat signature that is a slight warmth above the water rather than the full thermal bloom of a surface vessel. The laser dot appears on the contact's forward section. The designation transmits to the destroyer's fire control system. The 5-inch mount shifts bearing to the southwestern contact at 1:23:31 a.m. Fire, fire, fire. 3 rounds in 9 seconds, corrections called by the Seahawk crew between each one. The first round impacts short. The second round impacts short and right. The third round finds the contact at 1:23:48 a.m., and the thermal camera shows the same secondary bloom as the first contact. The southwestern semi-submersible's speed drops from 19 knots to 8. It continues closing, but at a rate that the fire control system now shows as a CPA, closest point of approach, of 2.1 nautical miles rather than a collision course. The hit has not stopped it. It has knocked it off the intercept trajectory. The northeastern contact is 5.9 nautical miles out and closing at 24 knots. The Seahawk cannot be in 2 positions simultaneously. The lead pilot makes a judgment call at 1:23:55 a.m. and transmits it to the CIC as a recommendation rather than a decision because the decision is not his to make. The recommendation is to shift the Seahawk to the northeastern contact, the one that has not been hit, the one that is moving faster, the one that is on a direct intercept course with no degradation. The CIC concurs in 2 seconds. The Seahawk pivots northeast. At 400 feet, the strait's terrain presents navigation constraints that the lead pilot is managing simultaneously with the camera operation and the fire control coordination, a cognitive load that his training has built him for and that he is performing at the edge of its sustainable rate. The camera finds the northeastern contact at 1:24:08 a.m. The laser designates. The fire control solution updates. The 5-inch mount shifts bearing to the northeastern contact. The destroyer's CIWS simultaneously acquires the southwestern contact, now at 3.4 nautical miles, damaged, closing slowly, in its thermal tracking queue, holding it in coverage while the gun addresses the greater threat. The CIWS is not yet firing. The southwestern contact is not yet inside the CIWS engagement envelope. The fire control system is managing both threats simultaneously, and the distinction between in queue and in engagement is being maintained with the precision that professional naval operations require. Fire. 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 The 5-inch mount is working the northeastern contact with corrections from the Seahawk crew. The first round impacts left. The second round impacts closer. The third round fires at 1:24:29 a.m., and the Seahawk camera shows an impact that produces the secondary thermal bloom the crew has been watching for. The northeastern contact speed drops to 11 knots. Its bearing rate changes. It is turning. 2 of 3 semi-submersibles are damaged and turning. The first contact, the probe, is 8.1 nautical miles north and still making 9 knots, trailing a thermal signature that the camera shows as a smear of warmth on the water, a platform that is damaged but not sunk, that may still have crew aboard, that may still have a weapon it has not yet attempted to employ. At 1:25 a.m., the southwestern contact reaches 1.9 nautical miles, and the CIWS engages. The 20mm rotary cannon fires at a platform that is barely above the waterline in the dark of the strait, and that the phalanx radar tracks through a combination of surface return and the Seahawk's laser designation data piped into the CIWS fire control system through a data link integration that was added to the destroyer class 18 months ago, specifically because semi-submersible threats in contested straits were producing engagement scenarios the original CIWS architecture had not been designed for. The integration works. The burst fires. The burst hits. The southwestern contact's thermal signature on the Seahawk camera expands and then flattens and then stops moving at 1:25:14 a.m. The contact is on the water. It is no longer making way. At 1.9 nautical miles, in the middle of the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait, it is burning with a low orange fire that the camera will continue to paint for the next 22 minutes. At 1:25:31 a.m., the northeastern contact reverses course. It is making 8 knots north, away from the destroyer. The bearing rate is consistent with a damaged platform attempting to reach the Yemeni coast. The tactical picture shows 3 semi-submersibles, 1 stopped and burning at 1.9 nautical miles, 1 damaged and withdrawing northeast at 8 knots, 1 damaged and withdrawing north at 9 knots. The contact that was the probe, the contact that absorbed the first 4 5-inch rounds and turned north before the coordinated attack developed, is now 11 nautical miles away and still moving. The TAO conducts a force-wide status check at 1:25:45 a.m. The destroyer has fired 17 5-inch rounds in 3 minutes and 38 seconds. The CIWS has fired 1 burst. No personnel casualties. No hull damage. The strait is clear ahead. The CO orders the transit resumed at 1:26 a.m. The destroyer turns south. The navigation team resumes the transit track. The strait's narrowest point is 3.1 nautical miles ahead, and the destroyer is going to transit through it at 18 knots because the mission is to maintain freedom of navigation through this passage. And freedom of navigation is not a condition that exists passively. It is a condition that is asserted actively by ships willing to move through contested water regardless of what tries to stop them. The Seahawk repositions to the southern sector ahead of the transit track at 1:26:33 a.m. The lead pilot has been airborne for 7 minutes and 20 seconds. He has fired his laser designator in support of 4 separate fire control solutions against 3 separate contacts. He has managed camera, designation, correction calls, and aircraft navigation simultaneously at 400 feet over dark strait water in a geographic environment where the terrain on both sides of the 18-mile corridor creates radar and visual hazards that require active attention. He has done this at a speed that the engagement timeline demanded. He does not transmit any of this assessment to the CIC because the CIC does not need it and the Seahawk has work to do. The P-8A arrives at 1:31 a.m., 12 minutes after the engagement began, a response time that reflects the distance from its barrier station at the time of the contact report. The P-8A assumes the southern surveillance screen ahead of the destroyer's track. Its surface search radar and sonobuoy capability extend the sensor picture beyond what the destroyer and the Seahawk alone can cover, and its presence transforms the tactical picture from adequate to comprehensive. Comprehensive is the standard the transit requires. The destroyer clears the narrowest point of the Bab-el-Mandeb Strait at 1:34 a.m. The channel widens. The coastlines on both sides move further away. The room to maneuver increases. The tactical picture to the south, the Gulf of Aden ahead, is clear. The P-8A extends its sweep pattern. The Seahawk maintains its forward position. The strait is behind the ship. The burning semi-submersible at 1.9 nautical miles has been logged as a navigational hazard in the destroyer's position report to Fifth Fleet, transmitted at 1:32 a.m., along with the full engagement account. The report covers the three-contact coordinated attack, the probe tactic, the engagement sequence, the round expenditure, and the current status of the damaged contacts. The report notes that one of the withdrawing contacts, the northeastern semi-submersible at 8 knots, may retain partial weapon capability and requests that the P-8A maintain tracking contact until the platform either beaches or stops making way. The P-8A acknowledges the request at 1:36 a.m. and begins a tracking pattern on the withdrawing northeastern contact. The contact is making 7 knots at a bearing that takes it toward the Yemeni coast at a point north of Mocha. It will reach shoal water in approximately 40 minutes. The P-8A will watch it get there. The destroyer is in the Gulf of Aden at 1:44 a.m. The water is deeper here. The coastlines are further away. The tactical picture is still populated. Nothing in the southern Red Sea and Gulf of Aden operational environment is empty of threat data, but the geometry of the engagement that ended 12 minutes ago is behind the ship now in the physical sense that matters most to a transit. The narrowest point has been passed, the mission has been executed, and the strait through which 17% of the world's maritime trade passes is still open. The Seahawk recovers to the flight deck at 1:51 a.m. The lead pilot completes the post-flight shutdown sequence and climbs out of the aircraft onto a deck that is warm from the day's heat and that smells of jet exhaust and salt and the particular metallic residue of a ship that has been firing its main gun at high rate in a narrow waterway. He does not pause on the deck the way the aircrewman paused on the carrier's deck 11 days ago. He moves directly to the intelligence debrief space because the ATFLIR footage from the engagement needs to be downloaded and annotated before the contact details fade from immediate recall, and the details are specific, and the annotation matters for the assessments that will be built from it. The debrief takes 31 minutes. The footage shows 3 semi-submersibles, 4 engagement sequences, 17 5-inch rounds, 1 CIWS burst, and the 12 seconds between the second and third contact appearances that constituted the most dangerous interval of the engagement. The window in which the fire control system was transitioning from the first contact to the second and the third contact was closing from the northeastern sector without a designated weapon on it. 12 seconds. The tactical picture was undefended against the third contact for 12 seconds. In 12 seconds, at 24 knots, a semi-submersible closes approximately 480 meters. The contact did not close 480 meters unopposed. It closed approximately 200 meters before the Seahawk repositioned and the 5-inch mount shifted to it. The remaining 280 meters of that 12-second window were absorbed by the fire control solution development time before the first round fired. The contact did not know about those 280 meters. The contact knew only that it was closing, and then that it was hit, and then that it was turning. 3 Houthi semi-submersibles. 3 minutes and 51 seconds of engagement. 17 5-inch rounds. 1 CIWS burst. 1 contact stopped and burning. 2 contacts damaged and withdrawing toward the Yemeni coast. 0 hull damage. 0 personnel casualties. The Bab-el-Mandeb Strait transited on schedule, on track, at speed. The Houthi Maritime Command spent 11 months building these platforms and developing the probe and strike coordination that produced the 3-contact attack. They spent 11 months on a tactic that the destroyer's crew addressed in 3 minutes and 51 seconds, at the cost of 17 rounds and 7 minutes and 20 seconds of Seahawk time. The tactic did not fail because it was poorly designed. It failed because the crew that was in its path had been thinking about exactly this problem for longer than 11 months, in simulators and in exercises, and in the accumulated operational memory of 17 days of continuous transits through water that does not permit complacency. The strait does not remember what passed through it tonight. The record does. The record shows the strait open. That is the only entry that matters.